You wrote, quote, "It helped that I could get away with absolute murder. Not only could I be openly gay, but I could graciously escort others out too, so long as they were famous and I had evidence." Let's talk about outing. You wrote that iconic cover of Out magazine. I think it was the title, the cover story may have been like The Glass Closet, and it had an image. It was a side by side of Jodie Foster and Anderson Cooper. They were sort of like silhouettes of them at the time. How was it that you were able to ostensibly out people? Like, what were the repercussions aside from getting yelled at? Like, did Jodie Foster ever confront you?
No, but I've had horrible repercussions from certain celebrities. But basically, I was just printing the truth. It's not even outing; it's just reporting. The gossip press had no problem reporting on personal things about celebrities that were not about being gay. But the point of outing, and by the way, my mentor was always Michelangelo Signorelli. He was the king of outing. It was to say, well, let's equalize things and let's normalize LGBTQ and not make that the last taboo, not make it unspeakable. And people would say, well, it's up to the celebrity to come out what they want. It still was. I was just the guy in the corner with the Alternative Weekly, or in this case, Out magazine cover story, saying they're gay, and then it's up to them to come out or not. I was urging them to be gay. This was a time when AIDS was a much bigger problem than now, and AIDS is still a huge problem worldwide, believe me, but it was more of a death sentence at that point. And it was so important to have visibility. And what my point with the glass closet for the Out magazine story was, there were a lot of celebrities who were living in the glass closet. In other words, you could see in, they were living gay lives. You could see that they were gay, but they refused to say it on the record. And I was saying, just say it. Mm-hmm. And all the arguments against that were so dumb. Like, why do they have to say it? It's so obvious. If it's so obvious, they could just say it. Who cares? Well, you care. You read the story and you're commenting on it, and you care. And I care. And no one ever said, you know, if a gossip column reported about a adulterous affair or a celebrity going to rehab, nobody ever said, this is an outrageous invasion of privacy. But suddenly with the gay, it was, how dare you? And we tried to change the landscape, and we succeeded in doing so, because everyone's out now. You know, like, there are still always going to be some closet cases, but basically now it's a cliche almost to say I'm queer, and that's great. That's where we want it to be.
Teach me about the social game, like how you were introduced to people. You wound up in these rooms, like in this sort of like rarefied air at these parties, and you would report on your nights out, you know, weekly in the Village Voice.
Well, I was emboldened by the fact that I worked for the Village Voice and I became pretty well known. I instilled fear in a lot of people, but I was known. And so if you're in a room, and at this point, if you went to a club, you would see Malcolm Forbes and Andy Warhol and all these incredible figures of that era. Keith Haring and Basquiat and the great artists, the performers, or just people who partied for a living. They were all pretty fabulous. And I got to know so many of those people. And half of them would run away when I walked in the room, and the other half would run towards me. And that was a good ratio, because it meant I was doing my job. And some of them played the game with me. They knew that I was looking for good copy, and they would kind of give me good copy. Some of them didn't want to be written about. It was a whole panoply of things, but it was such a different social situation than now, because I would be escorted into a club like Area, which was the hot club of the 80s. That was a downtown Tribeca club when Tribeca was really still pretty undiscovered. And it was art-based, where the owners, they made a lot of money from the club, but they didn't even care about the money. They cared about the artistic input into the club. And every 5 weeks or so, from top to bottom, the club would be redone with a new artistic theme. And I would just push my way through the dance floor to the VIP room. And then it was this kind of hodgepodge of Fellini-esque hedonism, where we were all kind of feeding off each other. We were all photographing each other, writing about each other. It was extremely narcissistic and elitist, but it was also celebrating the other. We were the other. We were the downtown celebrities. And we made like a Hollywood world within our ranks, so that we became the stars.
Yes.
As much as Julia Roberts or William Hurt or whoever the big movie stars were at that time.
Yeah.
And basically I would just go up to Malcolm Forbes came up to me and said he liked my work, and I almost fainted. And I was like, he probably likes me because I'm out of the closet and he's not. And he sort of admired the fact that I was living that life. And he gave me a great blurb for one of my books and wrote me up in Forbes magazine. And later, when he died, that became the beginning of outing, really, when Michelangelo Signorelli wrote that, why are the obits leaving out that he was gay? Why are they claiming that he dated Liz Taylor? Well, we knew that they were just friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw sort of a frightened man, Malcolm Forbes, an incredibly powerful businessman, tycoon, magazine publisher, sort of a frightened man who was admiring the fact that I was out there. And I never had that hypocrisy of saying, why aren't you out? Because I was very out.
What do you think the allure is of the blind item? And also, how have you seen it evolve? I mean, I would say now the present day version of the blind item, I guess, is what Dumois is doing on Instagram.
Yes.
Granted, her blind items aren't confirmed. They're just solicited from the public. And she openly says that these are not confirmed, like these could be just straight up made up. But tell me about the blind items in your day and how you really verify them, and also the psychology of the reader who can get so sucked in to reading a blind item.
Well, the fun of the blind item for the reader is it's a guessing game. They get to participate. And I would get letters, because a lot of these were way before internet. I would actually get letters in the mail or phone calls begging me to tell them who the answers were, and I wouldn't. But the logic repertorially behind it is that, of course, it's true. You got it from the same sources you got your other items. But if anyone sued, it would be hard to find the x-rays, the gerbil, the cocaine residue, or whatever you wrote about to really hold up in court. So the lawyer would be kind of cautious and try to make it non-identifiable, but a lot of mine are extremely identifiable. And when I wrote in 96 about the Club Kid murder, which at that point I had to do it as a blind item, the lawyer tried to strip away a lot of the details, and we kind of snuck them back in. And of course, people knew, and Page Six picked up on the item, knowing exactly that I was talking about Michael Allard, and who was the Club Kid leader who, with Freeze, killed a drug dealer named Angel Melendez. So that helped break the story, actually, that I posed it at that point as a blind item. But a lot of the blind items are just sillier things. They're just what rock singer has shot her nasal cavity to death with so much cocaine abuse that her assistant has to shoot the coke up her butt through a funnel.
That's a real blind item?
That was a real one, yeah.
Who was it?
It's a blind item.
Oh, it's still a blind, okay. What do you think of the blog Crazy Days and Crazy Nights, who's supposedly a former entertainment lawyer, where they'll then kind of reveal who the blind item is about?
Well, the Instagram page that you mentioned, they just solicit anything from the public, so anyone can make anything up. That's really not comparable. But in general, because of social networks, I think things are less coy now. Also because of sites like TMZ and BuzzFeed, they go for broke. They don't care. They're like, here's the mugshot, here's the x-ray, here's the evidence. Blind items to me now seem a little bit too coy and precious, a little too cute, when it's a different landscape. Everything is known now. No one can hide. Everyone has a cell phone that can record the evidence. And I think it's good that information is more accessible and accountable.
Describe for me a day in your life, or a day/night in your life in, say, the 70s, 80s, 90s. I'll let you pick your favorite era for you versus today.
Well, my column through those years, especially starting in the 80s and then the 90s, was event-based primarily. I did do items and reporting, but there were so many events going on in New York that I would start with a screening, and then I would go to a dinner in a restaurant, then I would go to a nightclub, then there might be a fashion show, then there might be an after party. And by the end of the week, I had enough material for a full column, or sometimes I would just spotlight one personality or one thought. Now I don't feel as driven to go out every night. I mean, lockdown really changed everything, where I was forced for 2 years to stare at the ceiling. And it was my worst fear, oh no, I'm going to be alone with my own thoughts. Mm-hmm. But it turned out to be fine. And the only reason I think it was okay is that we were all in the same boat. If it was just my life has collapsed and I can't leave the house, I would have been horrified. But it's we're all in this together. And I found that I was okay with just spending quality time with myself or going on Zoom. So now I don't feel the compulsion to do events as much as I did, combined with the fact that events are not what they were. And this isn't just me as a broken record, things used to be better, because I hate that bullshit. But it's that because of social networks and celebrities gaining power, publicists have the power over the media. There's so much media with websites and everything compared to the old days when there was just a finite number of columnists, that now they have the power, and events are much more regimented. It's much more red carpet. You stand over there. It's not so much you're all in a room together and just do what you want. The glory days of the Tony Award meet and greet was at Sardi's, and I would be standing there and you just go up to Bernadette Peters and whoever the big Broadway stars were, and they would usually talk to you. Now you sit there with everyone else and it's a press conference, and we're bringing in the 19 producers of the Michael Jackson musical to do a 10-minute press conference that you're not interested in, which you're also going to have to share whatever they say with everyone else in the room. It's not even a one-on-one. That's the way event coverage has gone. So now I just find other ways to write, really, I think pieces, opinions, trend pieces.
I loved last summer you wrote a piece on Provincetown that I loved. And I loved similarly a piece that you wrote it was either 2020 or 2021 on Fire Island. Tell me about your experiences on Fire Island versus your experiences in Provincetown.
Well, those are the two sort of northeastern gay meccas. Mm-hmm. I prefer Provincetown because it's an actual town. That's why they call it Provincetown. It has streets, it has cars, it has people walking streets, riding bikes. Fire Island, for those who don't know, first of all, it's two communities for the gays. There's Cherry Grove and the Pines. I prefer Cherry Grove, which is more diverse. The Pines is more sort of uppity white guys. Both the Pines and the Grove have wooden planks. There are no streets. There are no cars, there's no traffic. So you find yourself schlepping in the heat through these wooden planks, sometimes for hours. So that's a problem for me. The Pines, you know what? I've put down the Pines, but I still have a great time at the Pines. When I go to Fire Island, either of those communities, it's like the second coming of Jesus Christ. I'm very respected there. And I do like attention. But the Pines is primarily gay males, gay professionals. They're all 32 years old. They all go there to work out for their health and then do drugs. And they all
work in marketing.
Yeah, or retail. And it's fine. There are drag shows, but I do find once you go either through the meat rack or you take the water taxi to the Grove, it's diverse. It's more lesbians. It's more honky tonk. It's a little more, rough and ready.
That's a great description of it being more honky tonk. I love that.
Yeah. There are times when it's a little scarily so, like it's a little Bourbon Street or something, but I always have a great time. I could just stand outside the grocery store and meet and greet, and it's really fantastic.
That's hilarious. I love
it.
it.
And in Provincetown, I could fill entire days in Provincetown without having anything on the schedule. I used to go for the film festival, and now I'm like, I don't want to be in a screening room during the day. I'd rather just be hanging out at the town square or just running into people, catching up with friends, riding a bike. I adore Provincetown way more than even Fire Island because it's a city. It's also beautiful. It has seafood. It has drag queens. It has history.
Are you friends? I'm certain you are friends with Daniel Nardisio, who produces the nightlife events on Fire Island. Like, do you have a relationship with him?
Oh, yeah. I've known him for many years. I used to be on his radio show, and we did live shows called The Shit Show with me, him, and Bianca Del Rio. And before Bianca became famous. But yeah, he does the underwear parties in Fire Island, which I went to once. And it's like, I really don't belong here. Nobody wants to see someone my age, even fully clothed, which I was. But you're like a fish out of water. What am I doing here? Everyone is naked and doing things. But he's also had me, for example, MC a John Waters event where I interviewed John Waters at the Ice Palace in the Grove.
Yeah, actually, John Waters is doing an event this summer in the Pines. He's
giving his new show. It's like a monologue, which I saw. And I last year went to Camp John Waters, which is this camp in the middle of Connecticut in August where people pay for a weekend. And it's really fabulous. It's a beautiful camp. I won't reveal any details of what happened, but I enjoyed being the onstage interviewer for some of the celebrities and seeing just the fun people that go there.
Wait, so this is a private camp called Camp John Waters that he
It's part of
runs?
it's part of a regular camp, but for that period of time, it's Camp John Waters, and people can go online and buy tickets, and you get a bungalow. And like I say, I won't reveal anything that goes on, but it's tons of fun.
You used to say burning bridges was my shtick. Talk to me about that. Like, why did you have no problem, like, fully burning a bridge? And actually, the irony is that many of the bridges that you burned, like, for example, I think Rosie once called you a gay Nazi and cut to her, like, giving a toast at your roast. Like, you're friends now. So, yeah, talk to me about how, like, you just didn't give a fuck about burning bridges and then how, like, it all came around and now you're being toasted.
Yeah, I would get so angry about things, about closeted celebrities or homophobes, any of those topics. I didn't care if they were mad at me. David Geffen hated me, and he never toasted me later. So some of these bridges are not remade. But I was fearless, and part of it was a kamikaze time, the 80s, when everyone was dying of AIDS. We all thought we were going to just drop dead. So it was like, who cares? I didn't care if somebody found me unpopular. I was just going for broke and writing things. And now I'm looking back and it's like, yikes, I really was nervy. I also was nervy about some of the outfits I wore as I was doing this, because I'm like, wow, I really had some serious cojones to go around in some of those ensembles.
Speaking of your outfits, you described Andy Warhol's funeral. You wrote, everyone was dressed sedately. I was dressed like a 14th Street hooker.
Yes, I mean, this was a huge miscalculation on my part, and you can see it in the Netflix Warhol Diaries on Netflix, where I just thought everyone's going to treat this as a celebration of Andy and what he represented. I mean, he celebrated trans and drag stars. He was all about color and flash and fabulous. And when I got there, I was in a Ronald McDonald jumpsuit and a green sparkly beret. And I see Grace Jones, who's normally got, a flower pot on her head, and she's in black and she's crying for the cameras. And I'm like, oh shit, I really miscalculated. But I gaily went in with my friend James St. James. You see us in the Netflix thing, prancing up the stairs of St. Patrick. And then I wrote a column saying how absurd the whole ceremony was. The whole funeral was absurd because they were giving speeches as if they were talking about Mother Teresa or something. The speeches didn't relate to Andy Warhol. And I thought it should be a celebration of him, but of who he really was, not a saint. He was far from a saint. He was a genius and a visionary for sure. Let's emphasize that. And then I got in trouble for writing that. And Glenn O'Brien, one of his acolytes, started screaming at me that my column was disgusting. And again, another bridge burned.
What did you think of the sort of documentary style version of the Diaries that's out now?
I didn't watch the whole thing, I have to admit. I've done a lot of documentaries, and I have an article coming out on The Voice about this. I'm the king of the talking heads. I'm like a bobblehead savant for the streaming era. And sometimes when I watch these documentaries, either they get things wrong or they did a 19-day interview with me and they end up using one soundbite. It can be very painful, and sometimes it's wonderful. But I hear there's going to be a part 2 to the Warhol Diary show. And what people may not realize is he didn't write a diary. These diaries were done by Pat Hackett, who would talk to Andy on the phone. And they were transcripts of the phone. And I'm glad to be in the diaries 3 times because it means I matter. And I know that there are people who spend their whole life talking about how close they were to Andy Warhol, and they're not in the diary, and they weren't on the Netflix. It's like, You know what I'm saying?
I noticed the omission of Madonna in the Netflix special when he went to her wedding to Sean Penn is heavily covered in the diaries, and yet there's no footage of that, or they don't recreate that for the documentary. I thought that was sort of a stunning omission.
It might be in part 2.
Maybe.
But, Madonna doesn't need the press. She's fine.
Yeah, you interestingly never met her, or like you never had the chance to interview her or have like a meaningful interaction with her. Is that by design, or you just never crossed paths in a meaningful way?
We did cross paths because I had a band from 1980 to 85 called the Must, and then it was Michael Musto and the Must, and it was a takeoff on Diana Ross and the Supremes. We did Motown cover songs, and we and Madonna were booked equal billing as she was an up-and-coming singer at a place called Chase Park. It was a bank turned into a nightclub. But she sound checked from every angle of the microphone, and we were standing there waiting for us to get our turn to sound check, and we never got to because she was such a little perfectionist. And I would say a prima donna already, even though she was pre-Madonna.
What year was this?
This is 82, and she didn't care that we were there waiting to sound check. By the time she was finished, it was time to open the doors for the club. And I never talked to her. I was just like, ew. She's going nowhere.
Yeah, I know that you thought that. I know you thought that the song "Everybody," which was her debut single, was a piece of shit. Like you've like talked openly about that, and now like you've come to like revere. You know, you've come to like give her the respect that she obviously deserves.
By the time she did "Borderline," I was totally hooked. I was like, I love her. And there was a magazine called Out Week, which was sort of a gay activist magazine, and I did a cover story about how much she did for the gays and how she made us center stage. She's shown a spotlight on us. And I did appreciate that. I don't think she's a great film actress, but you can't have it all. You can't all be Lady Gaga, who I'm also a fan of.
I loved your piece about Gaga's campaign for the Oscars for House of Gucci. Again, that basically the Oscars called her up and were like, no, babe. Like, it's not happening. That was like the gist.
Well, Lady Gaga was trying to reposition herself as an actress who occasionally sings. And every interview she did to try to get that nomination for House of Gucci was about, I studied at Sanford Meisner, Circle in the Square, blah, 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 method acting. And then she said, and I lived as the character of Patricia Gucci. And when the character arrived, I wrote a letter. Gaga, you're not wanted anymore. Patricia has arrived. And there's one video where you see Salma Hayek going, oof. And Gaga even says, and Salma here was such a beautiful supporting actress for me. It's like, oof. But what I love about gossip is that everything turns on a dime. Because jump ahead just a few weeks later, the Oscars after the slap end with Gaga wheeling out Liza, who should have been a director's chair because that's what she wanted. And Liza's confused and Gaga, oh, I got you. Liza goes, I know. And all the people who were saying how horrible and narcissistic Gaga was forgot that. And now she was so kind to Liza. What a wonderful, giving star. And that's where I sit back at the world of gossip and just go, I love this business. This is so insane.
How did you get into gossip? Like, how did that become your avenue?
I noticed as a kid that one of the few times I did talk was to actually sit on the stoop and gossip about the neighbors with the next door neighbors. We kind of gossip about the across the street neighbors. That's how it works. It's like divide and conquer. And I think as someone who was uncomfortable with attention yet craved it, because I was shy and awkward, but I also wanted to be noticed, it's easy to deflect that by talking about Cher or Madonna. And by the way, there was when Madonna had the sex book party, I came with a whole getup. I was dressed like the Pope, and I had a picture of Sinead O'Connor that was ripped in half, like Sinead ripped up the Pope. It was just a mess. And Liz Rosenberg said, "Look, Madonna, Michael Musto's dressed like the Pope," and Madonna got a kick out of that. So that was another little interaction. And I could have then talked to Madonna, but I was sometimes demystifying is not the best way to go. It's better to just keep them as Madonna.
Mm-hmm. What is your personal favorite era of New York City? Like, do you have one, or is it kind of the Fran Lebowitz thing of like, whatever era it was when you were young and in your 20s, like that's the thing that you'll always kind of have this fondness or nostalgia for?
When you're young and you're first going to your first nightclubs, yeah, it's a dazzling time. Studio 54 was one of my first, so I started at the top. But my favorite time is now. And I've been through all the glory times. I've been through the disco, the downtown nightlife boom of the 80s. I've been on that conga line nonstop. And I'm happy to be around now. I'm very grateful. And even though I keep all my old videos and clippings, I never look at them. So I'm not Norma Desmond. I'm a receptacle of wisdom about the past, but I'm not living in the past. And I have the best time now, whatever I do, even if it's just having lunch with friends. Or tonight, I'm co-hosting an art show for Kenny Kenny, who was from the Limelight and has become a brilliant photographer. So there's always new, and exciting. And you have to keep up that optimism, or there's no point in going on.
I'm so inspired by that answer. What would you say your temperature is of New York City right now? Like, obviously, crime is up. In the 90s, Giuliani was heavily criticized for, the Disneyfication and, turning it into a tourist trap. Like, what do you think is going on now? Rents are on the rise.
Yeah, I've stopped with the complaining and the incessant broken record of things used to be better. That gets you nowhere. And you're also looking back oftentimes with rose-tinted glasses, because I used to do columns on the biggest nightmares of the nightclub scene. And there were a lot of nightmares to go with the fabulous people. And I was the target for them. It was like I was wearing a no pest strip that didn't work. And they would all buzz to me and annoy me. And I always was bemused about it, but it was truly annoying. What I find about New York now is post-lockdown, obviously everyone's dying for face-to-face, for social time again. And there are a lot of empty spaces that I think people are going to seize on and reopen. And already there's a new dance club on West 50th called Musica, where Lady Fag, who's one of the top promoters, has a weekly Friday party. And I went last week. It was incredible. And it was every bit as good as the old days. So why should anyone complain about there not being the old days anymore? Just go to Music on Fridays. It's called Spill Milk.
Go back to what you were referring to. Like a second ago, you were talking about like the disasters or the super annoying things about nightlife, even in the heyday. What really annoyed you back then?
Well, I'm a writer, so I'm a conduit to these people becoming fabulous, because I always talk about myself as sort of a dealer, but I wasn't dealing drugs. I was dealing press mentions, hits, boldface hits. And it is addictive, I know, because I've been self-promoting, and it does feel good to find your name in the press if it's a good write-up. But some of these people were just loonies who just ran around with no talent and just screeching and overdoing it. They didn't believe in the soft sell. But again, I was bemused. I was never angry about it, because in reality, that was part of my job. And I welcomed and still welcome people pitching me, no matter how lame the pitch is. And by the way, I found that pitching myself, one of my big messages to people, pitch yourself, even if you have arrived, because I got the Village Voice column because I pitched myself. And then in the 90s, I got on the E! Channel on the Gossip Show for 7 years because I pitched myself. And even though it made sense for me to have those jobs, these people might not think about it unless you remind them that I'm the right person.
Yeah.
It's degrading to pitches. I hate it, but I recommend it as a way of life because it does open doors.
What do you think of podcasters? I mean, I guess like people do refer to you as like, like an early blogger, which I don't know. I think you're like much more elevated than that. Like the term blogger is, I don't know, it's a little bit crass to me, but I would love to know your brutal honesty about podcasters. Like, are we all people too lazy to write?
No, not at all. It's just a different venue. But the problem is, as a subject, you can't do every podcast that you're asked to do, because everyone on earth has a podcast. And so I do ones like you, which are obviously good, or people that you want to support, struggling artists. And I've been asked to do a podcast and I turned it down because I was just like, does it pay?
Mm-hmm. And what'd they tell you?
That, and do I have to book guests and do all that? Like, what is
Wait, this is fascinating to me. Who approached you to do a podcast of your own?
There's a new nightclub opening that wants to do podcasts out of the club and asked me, but there was no mention of money.
Okay.
And I figured, I would probably have to produce it and book the guests and all that stuff. And
what have been some career opportunities that you totally fucked up for yourself?
In general, I've made all the right decisions. In fact, the best thing I ever did was when in the 90s, New York Magazine wanted to hire me away from The Voice when Kurt Anderson was the editor. And I turned him down because I just felt I'm not going to be able to write what I write in New York Magazine. Even if Kurt Anderson thinks he knows what I do and thinks I'll get away with it, I know I won't get away with it. And sure enough, he didn't last there that long, and I would have been out the door for sure. And I had many years at the Village Voice afterwards. I'm still there now. So that was the right thing to do. In general, I've stopped kicking myself in the in the foot. I made great decisions, including pitching myself. I never would have been at the voice job in the first place if I hadn't said, oh, I hear there's an opening, would you consider me? And they said, well, sure, you have to audition, write a sample column, we'll pay you for the sample. So they paid me to audition. And I was stunned when they said, you have the job. And that opened everything for me journalistically. It's been ever since Michael Musto from the Village Voice, 4 books, and then the E! Channel that opened every TV door for me.
It's amazing. I mean, I still see you riding your bicycle around the village. You're sort of iconically known for this. Talk to me about the bicycle.
I love the bicycle. And I just got an e-bike and an electric bike, which is the rare thing that I bought for myself. I usually don't treat myself to anything, and I adore it, but you can't leave it anywhere. It's this horrible catch-22. It's so great to use, but you can't really use it because you can't leave it anywhere. You can only kind of ride through Central Park and then bring it home, or, you know, sit in an outdoor cafe and watch it locked to a pole. But the reason I like a bike is it's enjoyable. It releases your endorphins. It's great exercise, and everything is 15 minutes away. I've never been late for an appointment. You know what I mean? If I have to go to screening, if I have to go to an interview, I'm there. It's not, you know, I'm always getting texts from friends. Oh, the N train is running late and blah, blah. I can't get a taxi, blah. I don't have that problem. The bike, just you zoom there, you zoom around the traffic, you zigzag, and you're there.
I was actually similar to the bike, or maybe not. I was actually at an event that you popped into for, like, literally you were there like in and out 5 minutes to interview the host of this event. And I noticed you, I wanted to like introduce myself to you, but like you were like there and gone in a minute. But I noticed that you still interview on a pen and notepad rather than even like an audio. Like you could just do a voice memo and have it all on your phone. Talk to me about that.
In some ways, I'm a Luddite. I had to be forced to join Facebook years ago. This friend of mine, Susan, was like, you have to do it. I was like, no, it's for the young. I don't belong. Blah, blah. Now, of course, I'm addicted. I can never live without Facebook. I still stick to the old, write something on I don't even have notepads usually. It's like a dirty napkin or something. Just because I trust it. I never have misquoted anybody. But I'm learning to, you know, you could just talk into a microphone and have a draft. I'm slowly edging into the present.
I just like had to bring that because I saw it with my own 2 eyes. I was like, oh, there he is with this little pen and paper.
I'm old school, and yet I'm up to date, and it really sums up who I am. That people use me to talk about the old days. You know, I've done so many documentaries tell us about the early days of disco and AIDS and activism, etc. But I'm also plugged into now. So it's kind of an interesting position to be in. Like a lot of people come to me for comments about now.
Yeah, you know, my observation, I guess, of how I mean, I almost could like answer like I almost feel like I would even know what you would say if I were to ask you like how celebrity has changed, and like the obvious answer to that question is social media. Like people can just take a picture of themselves where they can break the news themselves. It'll sort of eliminate the need for a publicist, for gossip columnists, for any of those types of people. Aside from social media, how do you think celebrity has been diluted to the point where people don't even, like, I haven't watched the Oscars in years, and I used to love that stuff. You know, when the year Titanic won, I was glued to the screen.
Well, because there's so much media now, there's more celebrities. Because there's reality TV, there are people who are nobodies who are suddenly celebrities. The Andy Warhol thing came true. Everybody is famous for 15 minutes. Everyone does have their own talk show, except me. But it changes it because celebrity is more omnipresent. And also everyone now has an opinion and a venue to spout that opinion. And it's good. All of this is good. I'm not complaining about any of this. Because now when I go on IMDb and I look up a movie, I'm really ashamed of myself, but I don't click on critics' reviews. I click on user reviews. The regular people who have an opinion about the movies. I trust them more than the critics. And I noticed that who used to be part of a finite number of columnists giving our take on everything, we're now just citizens in the world because everyone has a blog, a podcast, a Facebook page where they put their opinions on Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And again, they're cogent, opinions. Like some of them are very well written, and it's like, well, everyone on earth is a gossip columnist. Everyone on earth is a paparazzi, and it's not good for me in my career or my field, but it's good for the world that everyone has a voice. And as far as the celebrities, it's a weird dichotomy where they're more guarded and yet they're open. It's like they'll tell you everything on Twitter, and yet in other ways they're guarded, and it's like hands off, stay away. And I also like the fact that they're political. In the old days, it would destroy a celebrity to say their political views. They would always avoid that. I would interview celebrities and you mentioned politics. They got so nervous. Now they're all on Twitter, screaming their political views and screaming their COVID status and everything. And I think it's good. The more information, the better. This is what I was fighting for. Truth can set us all free.
And yet you are banned, I think for good, from Twitter. Yes. Now, are you pissed about this?
Very. I wrote a piece in The Voice because Kristi Noem, who I hate, she's the governor of South Dakota. She was coming out with these tweets about, I will go against all of Joe Biden's mandates. She's like one of those anti-everything COVID people, deniers. And so I wrote, sardonically, hyperbolically, I wrote, everyone come to South Dakota and die of COVID. Now, I wasn't really saying come. Do you know what I'm saying? There's something called hyperbole, satire, making a point. And I explained it in my appeal, and Twitter was not having it. They just said, no, you can't wish harm on people. I'm like, I'm not wishing harm. I'm commenting on how she's wishing harm. But that's too hard for Twitter and the algorithms.
You wrote, being marginalized, we had more connection with one another. But I do miss the 70s when we were perched between the underground status of the past and the accepted state of the future, placed in a glittery limbo where gay equaled fun way more than it does today. And this is from a piece about gay marriage and how you had no interest in getting married. Can you kind of expand on this? Maybe not necessarily about marriage as a thing, but what you wrote here really resonates with me because I do miss the days where it was a little bit more of a shadowy existence and like it wasn't the Disneyfication of pride and everyone being gay. I don't want everyone to be gay. Like, I don't. You know what I mean?
I felt weird writing that article because I'm not 100% yearning for the days when you could be arrested for holding hands with someone of the same gender. I just meant that when gay was subversive, it was more interesting than when it was generic, when they told us how we're supposed to look, when everybody on earth was a drag queen with their own TV show. That being said, we're going to get the subversive back because the Republicans are now working on undoing everything. So we're going to be sorry that we wanted to be subversive again because they're pushing us back into the shadows, and that's not good. So let me revoke everything I wrote there. We don't want to go back in the shadows. We want our rights. We want our dignity, and the accessibility of information, the visibility is all good.
Maybe it's just sort of my idealistic vision of what it was, or like the way it looks when you like look at old documentaries or old, pieces of art and film. I think maybe it's just because I wish I were maybe born in like a different era. Like I wish I could have like lived the 80s nightlife scene, or maybe it's something, maybe it's more me.
But see, also like that was post Stonewall. When I was coming of age and going to clubs, it was post Stonewall. So gay was no longer illegal or mental illness. And also it's New York. And I'm a cisgender white male. So it wasn't that hard to be gay. You know what I'm saying? So I never really knew what it was like really in the shadows. And I don't think I would yearn for that. But if we get back there, I'll be the first one to throw something at the new Stonewall.
Final thought here is, are you friends with Fran Lebowitz? Like it seems like the two of you would be contemporaries.
I've interviewed her. She's very funny. I think she's even more of a curmudgeon than I am. Like she would never say New York is good or I enjoy being alive. And that's fine. She's brilliant. I for years said just come out. She's one of the people.
She's out.
Did she seriously come out?
I thought she was always out.
No, see, that's one of those things. She's always out, but no, she never said it.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, unless I missed something recently, but for years, Michelangelo was always on her case that she just never came out and said it.
Because something I wanted to ask you. Oh, I thought everybody knew. I mean, I think everybody knows that she's gay. But the specific thing I wanted to ask you, or sort of like knew if you could confirm, was she dating or involved with Toni Morrison when Toni Morrison was alive?
I don't know that.
Because I think it's true. I think that's a thing.
I know Tallulah Bankhead and Hattie McDaniel. You know. Silly. I'm just being silly.